All right, ready to dive in. Today, it's all about something we all deal with every single day.
Mm.
Habits. Those
Ah,
things that, we do automatically without even thinking, but shape so much of who we are and what we accomplish. We're going to take a deep dive into how those habits form, how they affect us for good or bad, and most importantly, how to take control. And to help us do that, we're using this awesome YouTube audiobook. It's basically a summary of The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg.
great book. Really gets into the nitty-gritty of the science.
Yeah. And the cool part is it's not just theory, it's practical too. It actually gives you ways to change your habits based on, how your brain works and all that.
Absolutely. Tons of useful strategies.
So first things first, the foundation, right? The
Mhm.
habit loop.
Yeah, the habit whip.
I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this cue, routine, reward. But it's kind of amazing when you stop and think about what can trigger that whole cycle. Like the audiobook uses this example of the smell of coffee.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. Like you smell that coffee and suddenly your brain's like, okay, time for the routine.
Totally. It's like that smell, that's the cue, and then boom, you're up. You're grinding the beans, brewing it up.
And the reward, well, that delicious first sip, obviously.
Exactly. You got it. It's funny, though. We go through these loops all the time, but we don't even realize it, you know? It's just automatic. And that's the power of habits, right? But it's also where things can get kind of tricky.
Yeah, definitely. Because, habits can be awesome. They help us get things done. They can make us more successful. But the flip side is they can also hold us back if
Yeah.
they're not, the good kind.
It's like that double-edged sword thing, right?
Exactly. Think about like regular exercise.
Good habit.
Good habit, right? Usually something triggers it. Like maybe you put on your workout clothes, that's the cue, and that leads to, well, the workout, the routine,
Mm-hmm.
and the reward. That feeling you get after, that energy, the sense of
You
accomplishment.
got feeling like, yes, I did it. Right. And that feeling, those good vibes, they make you want to do it again. It's like an upward spiral.
But then there are those other habits, the ones that aren't so great for us. Like the audiobook actually talks about nail biting.
Nail biting.
Yeah, which, might seem kind of small, but it's a perfect example of how a bad habit can, like, really take over.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So maybe the cue is stress or being bored.
Yeah.
And then the routine, well, that's the nail biting itself. And the reward, well, maybe it's just like a little bit of relief from the stress,
A distraction.
a distraction.
Sure, yeah. But like you were saying before, with bad habits, there's usually a downside to that reward. So in this case, you end up with, well, messed up nails
Oh, like,
and probably even more stress in the long run. Plus, because you got that little bit of relief, even though it doesn't last, it reinforces the whole thing. So the cycle just keeps going and going.
it's like being stuck in this loop you can't escape from. This is making me think about, like, my own habits. I have this thing where if I'm working and I get stressed, I'll end up in the kitchen grabbing a cookie.
Oh, interesting.
I guess that's kind of my version of nail biting, right? Stress is the cue, cookie is the routine, temporary relief is the reward, and then I just repeat the whole thing.
Yeah, that definitely fits the pattern. And what's interesting is, like the book says, you can't just rely on willpower to break a habit because the habit is there for a reason, even if it's not a good one.
So you're saying I need to figure out what that cookie's really doing for me in that moment.
Right. Like, are you actually hungry or is it something else? Maybe you just need a break, a distraction from the stress.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's probably not about the cookie itself. It's about what it represents.
Exactly. And once you figure out what that need is, then you can start thinking about healthier ways to meet it. It's not about depriving yourself. It's about being smart and, finding new associations.
Right. Reprogramming your brain a little. I like that. It's like instead of fighting your brain, you're working with it.
Totally.
So how do we actually do that? How do we start to rewrite those bad habits? The audiobook has some cool strategies. One that really jumped out at me was this idea of not just stopping a bad habit, but actually replacing it with a good one.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
So it's like instead of focusing on what you're trying to stop doing, you're putting your energy towards something positive.
Right, exactly. And that's where understanding the root cause, like we were talking about before, is even more important. So let's go back to your cooking example.
Okay.
If you realize that, reaching for that cookie when you're stressed out, if it's really about needing a break from work,
Right.
then you can start to brainstorm other ways to get that break.
Okay, so instead of going to the kitchen for sugar, I
Mhm.
could like set a timer for 5 minutes and do some stretches or, I don't know, go for a quick walk. So I'm still getting a break, but in a way that's actually good for me.
There you go. See? You're still responding to that same cue, the stress, but you're changing the routine and the reward. And over time, as you keep doing that, you're basically rewiring your brain to go for the healthier option.
Wow, that's fascinating. So we're not fighting our brains, we're working with them to create these new pathways.
Exactly.
It's like we're becoming architects of our own habits. And, speaking of creating new pathways, the audiobook also talks about this thing called micro habits. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So micro habits, it's all about starting really, really small. Instead of you know, aiming for this huge goal that seems overwhelming,
Right.
you break it down into these tiny little actions that are almost ridiculously easy. So
Mhm.
for example, instead of saying, I'm going to run for 30 minutes every day, which can feel like a lot,
Yeah, that's a lot.
your micro habit could be as simple as just putting on your running shoes.
Oh, I like that.
Or if you want to start meditating, maybe your micro habit is just sitting quietly for 1 minute.
So it's like you're tricking your brain into starting a new habit loop, but without feeling intimidated.
Exactly. By making that first step super easy, you're less likely to resist it. You're more likely to actually do it. And the cool thing is, even those tiny little actions create momentum. Like once you put on those running shoes,
You're probably going to go for a run.
exactly. And once you've sat quietly for a minute, maybe you end up sitting for 2 minutes, then 5, then 10, who knows?
That's a great point. It's like each little step builds on the one before it. That actually reminds me of something else the audiobook talked about. Habit stacking. Isn't that where you basically attach a new habit to one you're already doing?
You got it. It's all about using those existing neural pathways, the ones that are already strong. You're basically piggybacking on a habit that's already automatic. So think about it like this. You brush your teeth every morning without even thinking, right?
Yeah, of course.
So if you want to start flossing regularly, you could stack that new habit onto your toothbrushing routine. You're already doing one, might as well add the other.
That makes so much sense.
Hmm.
Instead of creating a whole new routine from scratch,
Right.
you just add a step to something you're already doing without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
I actually do that with my coffee routine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like I always make coffee first thing in the morning, and then I sit down and read for a few minutes. It's just become automatic, like one leads to the other.
Gee, you're a habit stacker already. And that's what's great about these strategies. You don't have to change your whole life overnight. It's about working with how your brain already works and setting yourself up for success.
I love that.
Hmm.
It feels so much more, I don't know, empowering than just trying to force yourself to do things.
Absolutely.
It's like we can actually take control and design our own habits.
Yeah.
So thinking about all this, is there like a small action, a micro habit you could start doing today? Maybe something you could stack onto an existing routine. It doesn't have to be big. Even something tiny can be a powerful first step. And what's really exciting is that, these principles can be applied to so many different areas of our lives. It's not just things like exercise or meditation. It's also our relationships, our finances, how we work, even our creativity.
It's true. The book actually talks about how understanding the habit loop can help you improve your communication skills, build stronger relationships, manage your money better, even boost your creativity.
Wow.
It really shows how habits are like the foundation of everything.
Yeah. So we've explored how habits work, how they affect us, and some practical strategies for taking control. But now the question is, what will you do with this knowledge?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's like we've been given this secret decoder ring for our own behavior, Now it's time to use it.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for you to ponder. Thinking about that habit loop, the cues, the routines, the rewards. What's one habit you'd like to transform? And what will be your first step, even if it's tiny, towards making that change?
That's such a great question. And remember, even the smallest action, when you do it consistently, can create a ripple effect.
Totally.
So go out there, experiment, and see what amazing changes you can create in your life. Until next time, happy habit hacking. Okay, so we're talking about replacing bad habits with good ones. But how do we actually do that? I mean, the audiobook gives us some pretty cool strategies.
Yeah, it does.
And one that really caught my attention was this idea of not just eliminating a bad habit, but actually replacing it with a good one.
Oh, that's a brilliant approach. Instead of just focusing on what you're trying to stop doing, you shift your energy towards something positive.
Exactly. So instead of ugh, I need to stop eating cookies when I'm stressed, it's more like, okay, what can I do instead that's actually good for me?
Right. And that's where understanding the root cause, like we were talking about before, becomes even more crucial. Let's go back to your cookie example.
Okay.
If you realize that reaching for that cookie when you're stressed, if it's really about needing a break from work,
Right.
Then you can start brainstorming like other ways to get that break.
Okay, so instead of going to the kitchen for a sugar rush, I can like set a timer for 5 minutes and do some stretches or go for a quick walk.
Exactly. You're still responding to that same cue, the stress, but you're changing the routine and the reward. And over time, as you keep doing that, you're essentially rewiring your brain to choose the healthier option.
He's like, we're not fighting our brains, we're working with them to create new pathways.
Exactly.
And speaking of creating new pathways, the audiobook also talked about this thing called micro habits. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So micro habits, it's all about starting really small, really small. Like instead of overwhelming yourself with this massive goal, you break it down into these tiny actions, almost ridiculously easy. So for example, instead of saying, I'm going to run for 30 minutes every day, which can feel like a lot,
Yeah, that's a lot.
your micro habit could be as simple as just putting on your running shoes.
Oh, I like that.
Or, if you want to start meditating, maybe your micro habit is just sitting quietly for like 1 minute.
So it's like tricking your brain into starting this new habit loop,
Right.
but without making it feel so scary and intimidating.
Exactly. By making that first step so easy, you're way less likely to resist it. You're more likely to actually do it. And the cool thing is, those tiny little actions, they create momentum. Like once you've put on your running
They're
shoes.
probably going to go for that run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once you've sat quietly for a minute, maybe you'll sit for 2, then 5, then 10. Who knows?
That's a great point. And it kind of reminds me of something else the audiobook mentioned. Habit stacking. Isn't that where you basically attach a new habit to one you're already doing?
You got it. It's about leveraging those existing neural pathways, the ones that are already well established. You're basically piggybacking on a habit that's already automatic.
So like, I'm already doing this one thing without even thinking about it, so why not just add something else to it?
Exactly. So, you brush your teeth every morning without even thinking, right?
Of course.
So if you want to start flossing regularly, you could stack that new habit onto your toothbrushing routine. You're already there. Might as well just add it in.
That makes so much sense. So instead of creating a whole new routine from scratch,
Right.
you're just adding a step to something you're already doing on autopilot.
Mm.
I actually do that with my coffee routine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like I always make coffee first thing in the morning and I sit down and read for a few minutes.
Sure.
It's just automatic. One leads to the other.
See? You're a habit stacker already. And that's what's so great about these strategies. You don't have to change everything overnight. It's about working with how your brain already works and setting yourself up for success.
I love that. It feels so much more, I don't know, empowering than just trying to force yourself to do things.
Absolutely.
It's like we can actually take control and design our own habits.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about all this. Is there a micro habit you could start incorporating into your life, like today? Maybe something you could stack onto an existing routine. It doesn't have to be big. Even something small can be a powerful first step towards building a new positive habit. And what's really exciting is that these principles can be applied to like so many different areas of our lives. It's not just things like exercise or meditation. It's also our relationships, our finances, our work habits, even our creativity.
That's so true. The audiobook even gets into how understanding the habit loop can help you improve your communication skills, build stronger relationships, manage your money better, and even boost your creative output.
Wow.
It really is remarkable how these tiny, often unconscious behaviors can have such a ripple effect on our lives.
It really highlights how much power we have to shape our own realities. And the cool thing is, we don't have to do it all at once. Small, consistent changes can lead to some pretty remarkable results.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not about being perfect. It's just about understanding how habits work, and then using that to make better choices.
Right. And like you said, we don't have to change everything all at once.
Yeah, small changes, but consistent. That's the key. That's how you get real results.
Makes sense. So we've learned about how habits form, how they impact us, good and bad. And we've even gotten some pretty cool strategies for actually taking control. But now the big question is, what are you going to do with all this?
Ooh, good question.
So we've been given this secret code to unlock our own behavior, but we got to actually use it right.
Exactly. So think about it. Here's something to really chew on as we wrap things up. Remember that habit loop we talked about? The cues, the routines, the rewards. What's one habit you'd like to change, to really transform? And what's that first step, even a tiny one, that you can take to make that happen?
That's an awesome question to leave everyone with. And remember, even the smallest step, if you do it consistently, can make a huge difference.
It's true. You never know where it might lead.
Absolutely.
Right?
So go out there, try some of these strategies, experiment a little, and see what incredible transformations you can create in your own life. Until next time, happy habit hacking.